Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Friday evening, the 18th of January, 2019. Tonight's topic is a continuation of a topic we started earlier in the day, the lesson of Netflix versus Blockbuster Part 2. I did a live stream for our European friends earlier today, and today we will, or this evening, we're going to go and continue on that topic and get some of your thoughts on that and how it applies to a new example. And also, I was on Silver Doctors today. We discussed a variety of topics, including Roger Henry's video on the Hyper Smaulgld Classic mugs that was discussed, as well as topics like gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and the like. Okay, so today we are going to discuss briefly Netflix versus Blockbuster, and then get into a new rivalry. And we're going to use an analogy and see if that rivalry will hold water. But first, let's take a look at our gold, silver markets, our crypto markets, and the equity markets. Today, yet again, another example of the Trump pump and the Powell put. Stock markets rising again today, well over 1%. We had the Dow up 1.38%. We had the NASDAQ up 1%. And the S&P was up 1.32%. Now, what was the cause of this gain, other than just the general euphoria that the plunge protection team has confirmed that it met on Christmas Eve 2018? Well, we had a little announcement today that really shouldn't have moved the markets, but it did. There was optimism that supposedly there was some kind of U.S.-China trade deal. Now, yesterday, stock prices rose, not over general optimism over a trade deal with China, but a false report that the United States was considering suspending tariffs. That turned out not to be true, but that didn't harm the markets as the markets marched higher. Today, this was early in the morning, Dow is set to open up triple digits on growing optimism. And indeed, it not only rose triple digits upon the opening, it soared 336 points. At one point, was up another 20 points, but it did manage to finish close to the highs, as did the other indexes. Now, as you can imagine, that probably wasn't good for the gold and silver prices. We did have some economic news, something that you could hang your hat on. U.S. manufacturing production increased by the most in 10 months. So that, I guess, gave the Fed its cover if it wished to continue to raise rates to say, look, we really are, this economy really is moving up, and we may have to damp it down with some continued interest rates. But given that the stock market rose on that, there was no word from the Fed today. Although we did hear from the Fed, and that will be included later on in the program in tonight's Moronica. But the gold price fell down $11. $11 down, almost down 1%. Not a good day for gold. And as you can see, it closed very close to the day's lows. Silver, as you can guess, when gold goes down, what goes down more than gold? You guessed it. The silver metal. There it is. Down 1.27%. Down 20 cents, down to $15.32. There is no aftermarket on Friday, so those prices are where we'll be until Sunday evening. And what did that do for the gold-silver ratio, the unsustainable gold-silver ratio that's destined to go lower because you heard it on a Silver Pumper channel? Well, it went up again to 83.69. And let's just show you the 5-year chart, because they have been blurting and bleating and exhorting and screaming and yelling that the silver is a smoking bargain because of the gold-silver ratio. Well, I've been hearing that for 5 years, and so have you. At any point on this graph, they have told you, gotta buy silver because the gold-silver ratio is unsustainable. Well, it's unsustaining, close to its high. And you can see back in 2014, we were hearing that. We heard it, and it continues to go higher. And my belief is it will continue to go higher until gold really takes off, if it does, and then silver will fall, and there'll be some catch-up involved in a reduction eventually in the gold-silver ratio. Again, anything I say in this program is not investment advice, just my opinion. Keep that in mind as we go forward. Now, there was Tesla. We got to mention Tesla. Here's a guy. I just don't know how they get away with it. He was bragging last year that company was going to be cash flow positive. They were going to make money, all kinds of. He was going to take the company private at a valuation like 20% higher than where it was. It was like he wanted to take it private at $400. Apparently, there was no truth to that statement. There had been no discussions, especially there had been no discussions at the board level that he was authorized to make that statement, I believe. And we hear today Tesla cut 7% of its workforce as he sees a very difficult road ahead. I thought the road was all unimpeded, or we would be able to just continue with the wonderful results at Tesla. And Tesla has not had wonderful operating results at all. It's all been smoke and mirrors. Also in the gold market today, we learned a very sobering point, but it's actually what we say all the time about India and Indians. They don't buy gold when the price rises. They buy gold when the price goes down. Now, we know a lot of Westerners, they like when the gold price goes up, so they like to chase stuff and like to chase stuff higher like Tesla. But Indians are more prudent, at least in their gold buying habits. And because local prices had jumped to the highest levels in 2.5 years, they cut back. Now, why are Indian gold prices rising? Remember, they're rising against the rupee, which is falling. So gold is expensive for them. When your currency is deflating or inflating or subject to inflation and your currency is not doing well, that's not the time to buy gold. You already missed it. You can't buy much gold when your currency doesn't go very far. So what Indians do is they hope that their currency regains some strength, meaning that the price of gold will go down, and then they will pick up some more of the shiny yellow metal. All right, now we had a little twist in the wall battle, or more likely framed as the battle between now Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi. Remember, yesterday we talked about how Donald Trump had grounded Nancy Pelosi's congressional delegation plane that was set to fly to Brussels, Egypt, and Afghanistan on the basis that, look, if we're having a government shutdown, you should be in the country, because Nancy Pelosi had said to Donald Trump, because of the shutdown, we can't get your State of the Union because we've got an issue with the security at the Congress, which is not true because she never checked with the Secret Service or the other security people that there was indeed a problem. But yet, indeed, she was going to take the same security detail on the executive military jet overseas, to which Trump said, no, you're not. I think you should stay home. And he grounded her jet. And he went one step further today just to make sure that it wasn't directed at Nancy Pelosi directly. And he instructed the Office of Management and Budget to let Congress know that in light of the current partial government shutdown, the president has asked me to direct the heads of all executive departments and agencies and administrations or new policies in support of the legislative branch to travel. Under no circumstances during a government shutdown will any government-owned, rented, leased, or chartered aircraft support any congressional delegation without the express written approval of White House Chief of Staff, nor will any funds be appropriated to the executive branch be used by any congressional delegation travel expense without his express written approval, and so on. So that cuts down on the ability of Congress just to say, hey, I've had enough here. I'm going overseas on a junket, and we'll just let the government shutdown continue. Makes them have to hide in the country. They can't hide outside of the country. And there is some consistency in it, whether it is petty or not, because if there is a security issue, and if we are short of funds and you can't expect people to work for nothing, then there's a lot of security involved in sending a congressional delegation overseas. Can't have that. And now I believe it is time for Veronica. And today's Veronica is quite interesting because it comes from the Federal Reserve. Now, I don't know if these guys actually believe this stuff or they say it for political reasoning, but let's have a look at tonight's Veronica. Uh-oh, we got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent,
Smaulgld. This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
Breaking! New York Federal Reserve President John Williams says the shutdown could cut U.S. economic growth by 1%. Now, that sounds worrisome. Wow, the government's shut down. The government is shut down. Remember, the government, the GDP of the United States grows about 3%. So you're saying that if 800,000 people aren't working, that one third of your GDP is just going to evaporate. Now, first of all, only a quarter of the government is shut down. And we know that the government, I would imagine, is not or should not be 1/3 of the country's GDP. But remember, if it's 1/3, you're getting down to single-digit percentage, if indeed it's on a proportional basis of reduction in GDP because these people are not working. Now, I asked a rhetorical question. So what would happen if the federal government just went out? If you can get a 1% loss from not having 800,000 people, quote, working at the government, why not hire another 800,000 workers and increase the GDP 1% every year? I'm not sure that all works out, but that's Fed President John Williams. He's out there in, maybe you guys can guess, which of the 12 Federal Reserve bank do you think he is at? Well, I won't give you time to look it up. He is from the San Francisco Federal Reserve. Something in the water out there. Okay, now let's get on to this Netflix versus Blockbuster. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to play what we aired earlier today. It's very short, and it'll set you up for our discussion that we're going to have about Netflix. Because we discussed how Blockbuster was dominant, and it lost its dominance to Netflix, but not for a reason that you might imagine. And, well, let's have a listen. Let's get it on here. Cassette tapes. Get a little music first. Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is Friday afternoon, the 18th of January 2018, and the topic of today's discussion is the lesson of Netflix versus Blockbuster. And we're doing a special live stream today. We've had requests from people across Europe, from the Netherlands to the Czech Republic, United Kingdom, to do an afternoon live stream, so we hope to accommodate with this one. Now, today, the lesson of Netflix versus Blockbuster. And you're going to see why this may be relevant. Many of you already know the story, but it bears repeating some of the history. So let's go through what was Blockbuster. Now, some people may not even be old enough to remember Blockbuster. So Blockbuster was a video service that was founded in, I believe, 1985. And their original product was distributing VHS cassette tapes so that you could watch movies and the like on your VCR. And they got very successful, and they grew and grew, and they solved one major issue with disseminating videotapes, which was your ability to go to a place close to your home and rent your video of your choice. And they grew and grew, and they made a seamless transition to DVDs when they came out in the 90s. And They performed the same service, and they grew and grew, and there were more and more Blockbusters available in many neighborhoods, so you were never that far away from a Blockbuster if you wanted to rent a videotape or the new DVDs. And as the video cassettes became obsolete, they still carried them for the longest period of time for those people who were still using the VCR. But as I mentioned, they made a seamless transition into DVDs and then into Blu-ray, and they appeared to have an unassailable position, a market position, because they had locked up all of the prime spots in malls and in corners in major cities where you were never that far from a Blockbuster. If you wanted a video and you wanted to watch it right away, all you had to do is go and get it. Now, one of the risks to Blockbuster was the idea that companies would start streaming videos and that you would not need to go to the store, and that would be a very convenient thing. And that was one of the biggest threats that Blockbuster faced. Now, of course, Blockbuster started its own streaming business, so they thought they had that covered. But when streaming became a threat on the horizon, the streaming services were not that good. And the reason was the broadband capabilities of the infrastructure were not that, they did not really support video. They barely supported MP3s and music. So consumers preferred still to go to their Blockbuster and get a VCR tape, or increasingly started to get the DVDs and the Blu-rays. So it looked like Blockbuster would be able to hold its position. But Blockbuster had an issue, and it wasn't streaming video. A new company came along in 1997. It was called Netflix. Now, what Netflix did, they did not solve the streaming issue. In fact, they didn't solve any issue, except for one very important issue that Blockbuster could have solved on its own, but refused to do so. The advantage of Blockbuster was you can go and get the video whenever you wanted, and you can have it almost instantaneously. What Netflix offered was not instantaneous. They didn't have a streaming service at the time. They didn't have their own studio. So what was Netflix offering that was so special? And I remember when it came out and I thought, okay, so why would I want Netflix? What is the point of Netflix? And I'm looking here at a cover, or you're looking at a cover. It shows the 20 years of Netflix. It's actually 21 years. It says, it feels like we've been together for 20 years. And indeed they have. What you're looking at is a mailer. Now this makes no sense. You're moving into the digital age, and a company comes along and it's going to mail you the DVDs. Now this would appear to be a big time loser. Why get something in the mail, wait a few days to get the movie that you want to see, when you can scroll down to the store and down to Blockbusters? In many instances, if you lived in a city, you actually could walk and go get it and watch it immediately. Blockbuster had an Achilles heel, and that was while they had solved the problem of allowing people the ability to watch when they wanted to, whether it was a video cassette or a DVD or a Blu-ray, they had one issue. And that was, while you could go down and rent those media, those video media, if you did not return it within the prescribed period, you got charged a fee. He says, well, so what? You know, you get charged a fee. That's right. Just like at the library, if you take a book out, the library doesn't charge you anything, but at some point, you not returning the book means others can't get that book. And so as a disincentive, they charge you a fee at the library. And it's the same thing at Blockbuster. If you do not return your video cassette or your DVD or Blu-ray, you had to pay a fee, and that seemed only fair. However, most people, when they have to pay fees, they get really annoyed. And they realize they rented the thing, they rented the movie, they watched it once, and sometimes your fees could exceed the price of the rental if you held on to it too long. What Netflix did was they solved an issue that Blockbuster itself could have solved, but didn't. Blockbuster looked on the horizon and said, the real threat to us, I believe this is what they discussed, was video streaming. So they probably rushed to put together a video streaming service to make sure that they would also have a footprint in the real world, but then also, and companies have done this. Walmart, where they keep their bricks and mortar footprint, which is very important, and then they add in the digital component online. Now Netflix, as I mentioned, was not going for the digital. They were going after the customers of Blockbuster that did not like the idea that if they rented a video and didn't return it on time, that they'd have to pay a fee. So what Netflix did, and this is how Netflix gained its foothold. They didn't gain their foothold by providing a superior streaming service or providing original content to their studio. That came after they dethroned Blockbuster through this new method of delivering their videos and DVDs by mail. And the reason it was successful is people had been fed up with paying these fees, and they thought, look, it's better to rent a movie. And the genius of the Netflix was, we don't charge you any late fee, but if you don't return the video, then you can't rent another one, knowing that customers don't rent videos as a one-off, that they rent people who are consumers of videos. They binge watch, they watch one after the other, and the incentive to turn in the video was a positive incentive, so you can order 2 or 3 more, versus, oh, I better return that or I'm going to owe $6 or I'm going to go $8. And in that fashion, they managed to start chipping away at Blockbuster's share, and Blockbuster was dominant in 2004. And this was well before video streaming was even on the horizon. They were just starting. YouTube, it came out in 2005. It looked like Blockbuster had it all and was going to keep it all. But it was those pesky fees that did in Blockbuster. And they never, I don't think, maybe they might have at the end changed their service, but the idea that you can avoid the fee was something that consumers gravitated towards, and that allowed Netflix to drive a wedge in between the Blockbuster customers and bring them to themselves. And that shows that customers will change their behavior if there is an incentive to do so. Even if on its face Blockbuster was a superior product. The superior product that Blockbuster had was you can go and get your videos immediately. And yet people chose the slight inconvenience of having to wait, but realizing that it was far better that, and they knew they would rent more videos on this system, whereby if they returned a video, they would be able to rent more. A disincentive to Blockbuster use is, and you would have this, a family member or roommate wouldn't return the video, and now you paid the fine and you figure, I don't have the money now to go and rent a new video, so screw videos for a while. I'm not going to watch any because I just spent my video budget on late fees. Now why are we mentioning this? Well, later on tonight we're going to do part 2 of this, and we're going to discuss how fees sometimes, and this is an example, can destroy a company. Let's take a look if we have anyone in the live chat. We don't. We've got a small audience today. I didn't expect to get a big audience, but please stop back this evening and we will do part 2 of the lesson of Netflix versus Blockbuster. Thank you very much for listening. Okay, well, that was earlier today, and you're wondering why am I talking about Netflix and Blockbuster. Let's go through a little more information about Netflix and Blockbuster. Blockbuster started out in 1985, and by 2004, a 19-year period, became the dominant video rental company in the world. There was nothing that could touch it. Netflix came out in 1997 and was really nothing until about 2007. And as we mentioned, Netflix dethroned Blockbuster not because it created original content that came later, not because it had stores, it had more stores, not because it had a superior streaming company, because Netflix beat Blockbusters before that happened. In fact, it never went into physical distribution. It had to mail its DVDs and VHSs. And Netflix managed to win the game before the digital age, before digital streaming, before creating original content. And it won for one reason: no late fees. Simple as that. In fact, it was, you gave up the ability to watch the video when you wanted it. You had to wait for it to come in the mail. And yet, people were willing to be inconvenienced and not go down to their Blockbuster store and get a video when they wanted it, to watch when they wanted. They had to wait for it to come in the mail. And the reason they did that, they preferred not to pay the late fee. That is a consumer preference, a merchant preference. If you have to pay fees that you view are unjust or too high for what you get, the market will come up with a way to get around it. Now, just think what industries today have fees that are too high. I could think of a couple. One of them is the bank. You have the fees, they're too high, and nothing's been done about it. Why? Well, because banks are essentially monopolies. They're state run. I mean, they're state sanctioned. You have to get a banking charter, and we know how banks are. And there's very little competition in the bank. And when you do see these upstart banks like credit unions, they will tell you that they don't have high fees. It's one of the things that they'll always talk about when you have a competing bank is, you'll see commercials for it, they're even on YouTube, that they don't have those pesky fees. They don't nickel and dime you to death. Now, fees are a very important revenue stream for monopoly companies. Why? Because they don't have to do anything else. They just basically have to collect them. And when they collect those fees, they go straight to the bottom line. They're not providing an extra service. They're not doing anything other than providing the service they already give and then gouging you on the other end. So Netflix, once it had a certain number of customers, knew and would bake into their business model a certain amount of fees. They know that people are going to be late and they're going to collect that fee. And I don't remember looking at their financials, but I'm sure it was a percentage of their revenue, and it was 100% margin. It's the same with the banks. They know that they're going to get fees. They know that people are going to be late or they're going to overdraft, and they're going to gouge you on that. It's similar to what, it's not quite the same, but there is a hidden fee in a gym membership in that if you don't go, they count on you not going, which means that they can actually sell more space in the gym than they actually have room for, because they know a lot of people aren't going to go. So these are the types of business models that people don't like. And if you could, I guarantee you people would like to pay for their gym, maybe on an a la carte basis, but no one's come up with that business model. And I think people blame themselves for that, and there's some other psychological issues there. They figure, well, if I'm not going to go to the gym and I paid for it, it's my fault. I deserve not to take the service that was offered to me, and I'm still out of shape, I'm still out of weight, and so on. But when you don't return something like a Blockbuster video, you feel cheated, and it also takes away your ability to actually pay for videos that you might want to watch because you've blown it on, let's say, the same video. You go out and you rent Godfather 2 and you don't return it for a couple of weeks. It ends up costing you the price of perhaps renting 2 more videos, so now you never see Godfather 3, which is probably a good thing anyway. All right, so the free market in the Blockbuster case took care of that. You had a monopoly, and the way the monopoly was attacked wasn't by providing a superior service and trying to open up more stores, because there's a theory in economics, the Chicago School of Economics theory is that monopolies don't need to be attacked by antitrust laws because markets will take care of them. And when people say, well, why would anyone attack, why would anyone try to dethrone a monopoly? It's going to cost too much money. And they said, well, the reason you want to spend all that money is because if you dethrone the monopoly, then you can reap those monopoly-style profits. So when people say, well, no one's going to go out and raise a lot of capital and try to compete with Blockbuster and open up a bunch of stores, thousands of stores to compete with Blockbuster, they're never going to make it. And that would discourage people from doing that. But there is a point that if you did raise, if capital raising was the only issue, and if someone could model out that if we raised $1 billion, that we could dethrone Blockbuster using its own business model. Now, that's not what happened, and that might have been a waste of money. That might have failed. But what Netflix did was they attacked it from an entirely different direction, where they actually provided, in my opinion, an inferior service because you couldn't get what you wanted when you wanted it. But what they took away was the ability of Blockbuster to gouge you if you didn't return your video. And this could have been avoided, as we pointed out in the original video, if they had just waived the late fees or changed, or just had, look, if you bring it in 2 days later, you can't get another one. They could have done something about it. They could have started a mail system. They did. It was way too late. Way too late. They had relied on those late fees, in my opinion, to drive their business, and they weren't willing to give it up right away. And that happens often in business. You see something where you're making money, you're making good profits, you're making good margins. Even though it's pissing off the customer, you think, well, where else are they going to go? Same with the banks. We're going to charge them. I know certain banks, they'll charge you for a business account. They'll charge you a monthly fee to put your money in there. And then they come up with ways that you can avoid their monthly fee if you use their other services. Now, there's other banks who just don't charge you the monthly fee, and that's how they try to get your business. So let's now take a look at something that I saw today in the news. I saw this note from BitPay. I was very surprised to see this. Crypto payments since BitPay reports it had $1 billion in transactions in 2018. Now, one of the things we hear all the time from the naysayers about cryptocurrency is no one uses it. No one uses it. Well, BitPay ran through $1 billion worth of transactions in 2018. I believe they're the largest, and I think they process Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash only. Coinbase processes payments, and there's a few others. So the idea that nobody is using it is false. 1 billion in transactions. Now, 1 billion is not a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money to us, but it's not a lot in transactions. But it does highlight that a certain number of people are using it, and the merchants are using BitPay to process those payments. Now, why do I bring this up in connection with Netflix and Blockbuster? Well, I saw another thing today. If you guys know about Coinstar. Coinstar is when you go into the grocery store and you dump all your change in there, and then you can get gift certificates, or they'll give you a percentage. It's really bad percentage. It's like 90% of the coins you dump in there. You dump in $20 worth of coins, quarters, nickels, dimes, and so on, and they'll give you $18 in cash. I mean, it's a great business for Coinstar. Or you can get a gift certificate from a bunch of restaurants and Amazon and things like that and not pay the fee. Now, they're in a lot of they're in restaurants. They're in a lot of supermarkets, thousands of them. Well, they announced today that they are going to now offer the ability to buy Bitcoin at these Coinstar type machines in grocery stores. And remember, I've been talking about the rise of the ATMs, but this is a pretty big story today because it was also covered here in CoinDesk. Beyond the Coin. This is a large company that's involved in this point of sale, or somewhere in the store these machines exist, and you can now buy Bitcoin at some grocery stores in the US. And they'll allow consumers to buy up to $2,500 in select grocery stores. Now, if this takes off, we're going to talk about the implications of having these, just this aspect, these machines in grocery stores. Here's another one here. It was also reported in Cointelegraph. US Bitcoin ATM firm CoinMe to sell Bitcoin at Coinstar coin counting machines. Now, this is separate from the 4,194 Bitcoin, Litecoin ATMs that exist in the world, according to CoinRadar, of which, now check this out, the United States has, and many people might not know this, but the United States has, according to CoinRadar, 2,521 Bitcoin ATMs, of which 372 are in Los Angeles as of today, January 18, 2019, 118 in San Francisco area, 320 in the Chicago area, 520 in the New York metro area, 211 in the Miami area. Now, most of these Bitcoin ATMs are located in shops. Now, why is that important? Well, the shop owner is going to have an incentive to make people use the ATM. Why? There's fees associated with the ATM. They share them with the ATM provider. Also, if people come in and use the Bitcoin, Litecoin, whatever cryptocurrencies are dispensed at that ATM, they have a customer in the store who most likely is going to want to spend, if he's not just hodling, those coins in the store. So the merchant's going to set themselves up with a BitPay or a Coinbase or some other payment alliance payment processor to process the cryptocurrencies that they've already sold and received a fee on. Now, when Bitcoin first came out, I had the exact same reaction to it that I had to Netflix. Let's go back to Netflix. When Netflix came out and they said, yeah, we'll mail you your DVDs. I thought, well, what's the advantage in that? I don't need to get my DVDs mailed to me. I'll just run down to the Blockbuster and snag it. Yeah, what about the fees? Yeah, what about the fees? I always return my DVDs on time. Wrong goes star. No, I don't. Sometimes someone in the family or myself, we'd forget about it, and you'd end up going back to Blockbuster and getting a $15, $20 hit for nothing, just because you forgot, you lost it, you weren't paying attention, whatever it is. Life happens. So the advantage to a lot of people started to say to themselves, no, this is kind of a good thing, this Netflix, because look, after all, I use the thing all the time. I have now guaranteed myself that I'm not going to pay any late fees. And you know what? I can wait. And if I order them in batches, then as long as I return them, I can order more batches. And next thing you know, people are binge watching and without any worry in the world. So you gain your customers. And Netflix doesn't have the issue of thinking, oh, you know, one of the reasons that Blockbuster, when they rent them out, they're concerned if you don't bring it back, then they're going to lose the rental fee, or people might damage them or whatever it is. But at least they know that the people, if they don't bring them back, they can charge them. If they bring them back late, they're going to get paid. The Netflix model was you have an incentive to bring it back, not a disincentive because we're going to come after you or we're going to charge you the late fee. So Netflix almost had an insurance policy that people would bring back the DVDs and VHS tapes because they wanted more. Now, when Bitcoin first came out, I thought to myself, why would you want that? Oh, you can use it to go buy stuff. And I said, yeah, I can use dollars, I can use checks, I can use credit cards, I can use a lot of things to go buy stuff. Why does anybody need Bitcoin or Litecoin or any cryptocurrency to buy stuff. What is the point? Oh, it's cool. You can go up there and it happens really fast, and then you're supporting Bitcoin. Like, why do I want to support Bitcoin? How does that help me? Oh, because Bitcoin's going to go up in value. Oh, okay. So my incentive is to buy Bitcoin because it's going to go up. Then why do I want to use it in the store? If it's going to go up, that defeats the purpose. In fact, if I use it in the store, it's going to go down because I'm selling it. So it took me a long time to realize that this, well, it didn't take me a long time, but for a long time, I thought there was absolutely no benefit whatsoever in Bitcoin. And then the other one was, well, if you want to leave the country and you want to bring $200,000 with you, you can use Bitcoin. And I thought, okay, if I had $200,000, I wouldn't be that worried. And if I actually did want to leave the country with $200,000, I would buy the Bitcoin at that point when I had the $200,000 then. So why would I buy it now? Well, because it's going to go up. Well, there you go, back to speculation. So none of those features meant anything to me, or to most people, because most people weren't planning on leaving the country and planning on that. And if they were to leave the country, they could have always bought the Bitcoin at the moment they were ready to leave the country. And if you wanted to buy coffee, you didn't need Bitcoin. In fact, most places don't and still don't accept Bitcoin for coffee or anything else. Well, there's an increasing number of places that are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and other cryptocurrencies. And therein lies the adoption part. And therein lies how Bitcoin may solve the fee issue. So remember, Blockbuster came out in 1985. It took about 19 years to become dominant. Netflix came out around 12 years later. It took about 10 years to knock off Blockbuster. Now, let's forget the whole Bitcoin isn't real money and all that nonsense, because we deal in fiat currencies. We transact in fiat currencies, and we're not talking about Bitcoin as a store of value. We're not talking about gold versus Bitcoin, silver versus Bitcoin. We're talking about why anyone would want to use a currency. That's all I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the value of any of these. Their speculative value, their asset value, nothing. So this has nothing to do with gold and silver, because gold and silver is not used as a currency. It's not used in day-to-day transaction, and there's absolutely no incentive to use gold or silver in a day-to-day transaction. The only time we discuss this is that gold and silver would ever be used in such transactions is when you have a grid downage, you have an economic crisis, or so on. I'm just talking about day-to-day world. Well, we get along fine with fiat currencies, bank cards, credit cards, and so on. But there's a problem using credit cards. There's a problem using bank cards and so on, in that in some instances, if you're a credit card user, you could run up credit card debt. Well, that's a problem. If you knew that you can spend money and not have to worry about credit, maybe you might prefer another currency. But that issue, Bitcoin doesn't solve that issue really, because you can just put yourself on a cash-only basis. You could put yourself on a debit card-only basis, check-only basis, and solve your issue. You don't need Bitcoin for that. So again, I struggled with what is the point of buying Bitcoin other than to hold on to it because it's going to go higher. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why would it go higher? There's a lot of people yelling and screaming it's going to go higher. Yeah, but if no one's using it for what the purpose of it is, then why would it go higher? Oh, it's a digital asset and there's not much of it. So there's not much of a lot of things. That doesn't make them worthwhile. There's 2 Smaulgld paintings and they're worthless. So I don't understand the idea that just because there's 21 million Bitcoin, why that is going to make me go out and buy some. And therein is where it starts to change. Who else hates high fees? Well, the merchants hate high fees. Now, the merchants get gouged by credit card companies, by banks, as we mentioned, and also by chargebacks. You buy something on credit card at a store, $10,000, $20,000 item, maybe it's a piece of furniture, and then the consumer says, I don't like this anymore. The guy ripped me off, whatever. And he calls up the credit card company and he gets his money back, and the merchant has forgotten about it. Now he's out that money, and he has accounting issues because he booked it, and then he has to reverse the charge and so on. Also, just in day-to-day transactions, they lose money because they have to appeal to the customer's wish to use a credit card rather than carrying cash. That's a separate issue, but consumers do prefer to pay by card or by phone, and yet they end up having to pay the fee to the payment processor, whether it's PayPal or the credit card company. And you'll see sometimes some smaller stores will say no credit cards unless it's $10, discount if you pay for cash. But your large companies don't do that. They just accept it. They eat the cost. But again, there's a big savings if they didn't have to pay all of those fees. And that is where the incentive starts to come in as to why you would buy Bitcoin or Litecoin or any other cryptocurrency. It would be if merchants start to realize that they can save on their fees and avoid chargebacks if they accepted these cryptocurrencies through a company like BitPay or Coinbase. And then they can also offer, and we have seen with the precious metals dealers like APMEX and others, they will offer you a discount if you pay by Bitcoin or Litecoin versus if you pay by credit card. And the reason is quite clear, that it costs them a lot less to transact and to process a payment in Bitcoin than it does to process it through PayPal or credit card on their site. So PayPal came out in 1998. What is the biggest problem people have with PayPal? The fees. For example, if you send Smaulgld, when you buy a mug, $23.99, right off the top, they take $1. $1 per mug I lose when you send money to buy the mug. Why is that? Because that's their business. They're charging you for a system. It doesn't cost them $1 to process that payment, but that's what they take. They take $1. Patreon does the same thing. Just to have a nice little interface up there, they charge you when you send a Patreon each month, and then I take that and I send it through the PayPal account, and there's a processing charge. Those fees are really high, especially when you're dealing with small transactions. I have a few Smaulgld subscribers who actually are on PayPal, and I get a $2 and a $5, this is a couple of them, a donation every month, and I get like $1.40 out of the $2. And again, that's not, I mean, that's PayPal. I'm working for PayPal. They should be happy that people send me money because they're really sending it, a good portion of it, to PayPal. And so what's happening with a lot of companies, they're realizing that they can offer discounts and it's convenient for them and they can save the fees and the people can get the discount if they pay by cryptocurrency. So that starts to be a reason why you might want to go out, and again, this is an investment advice, why people might go out and get Bitcoin and have $100 of it or $200 of it, not invest in it and put thousands of dollars in it, because they might be in a store and they might be able to use it and get the discount. And I say, well, if the price goes down, well, that's possible too, but you're really not that exposed if you only have $100. And chances are, over time, the lowest low every year, the lowest low every year for the last 10 years has almost always been higher. Even with 2018, the lowest low was like $3,200, which was higher than the 2017 low of about $700, and you go back from there. So that is a reason why you might start to see the free market, which would be the cryptocurrencies, starting to eat into companies like PayPal. Now, we mentioned PayPal came out in 1998, just to keep your analogy going. And, right now, I would say 20 years later, they're at their peak. They really control the whole payment system. They're the biggest out there. And in 20 years, now Bitcoin came out in 2009. And if you follow the Netflix model, Bitcoin wouldn't really have an impact at all on companies like PayPal for another 3 or 4 years, because it does take some time for the adoption. Now, it may happen, it may not, and it may be something totally different than Bitcoin or Litecoin or any cryptocurrencies, but there's a problem that needs solving, and that is the fees that are associated with transactions. The problem with associating a fee, so for example, when you want to buy gold or silver, you understand the fee. They have to make the coin. There's a fabrication charge. They got to make a little money on it. But it costs them money. Someone's got to pour it. They have to buy equipment. They have to make the die. They have to stamp it. They got to do a lot of stuff. The problem with digital transactions, once you set up your payment system, each transaction, it doesn't cost them anything, and it shouldn't cost them anything. I mean, yes, they have to make a profit, and yes, they had to set up a system, and they have to maintain it, and they have to secure it, and they have to hire people, and there is work. They should get paid to process the transaction, but they're able to charge that much because no one else has come up with a way to allow payments to go through securely, quickly, for less money. And that's exactly what Bitcoin and Litecoin do. You actually can send a certain amount of money faster and for a much lower fee, even if you use a payment processor. Now, it's possible that that might be the path. And so I asked earlier today, see how many people actually voted on this thing. And I'm not even sure it's going to happen. But my point is that the free market could make this happen, and it could be through cryptocurrencies. It could be something else. Or we could all just be stuck paying fees for the next 50 years. I doubt that. Okay, so what percentage of global payments will be conducted in cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin and Litecoin, in the next 7 years? And we got, let me bring it up on the screen for you here rather than just trying to read it to you. But the idea in my mind is if you have a free market, and again, unless there's forces trying to stop this, which indeed there are. But remember, Blockbuster tried to stop the rise of Netflix, and it couldn't do it, and it was about fees. And let's see here what people think for our poll. Here's the poll. Okay, there's just 14 of you, but some skeptics, less than 1% in 7 years, say 29% of you. 1 to 5% percentage of global payments conducted in cryptocurrencies, 21%. 5 to 10%, 14%. No one said 10 to 15%. 36% of people think that within 7 years, cryptocurrencies will be flying around, and 15% of overall transactions in 7 years. Now, 7 years is a long time, and it's quite possible something comes out that supersedes Bitcoin or Litecoin and doesn't have the mining charges, and it's even more free. Who knows? Remember, there's always got to be some type of profit motive, and the profit motive that exists for Bitcoin and Litecoin is not just the miners, but is the BitPays and the Coinbases where they can transact and do the conversion and the payment processing. That doesn't mean that you have to use them and people can trade peer-to-peer. It doesn't take away the inherent qualities of those currencies, but it also means that they can be used in the payment system, and that's partially what's happened, and that's why I'm very surprised to see BitPay announce 1 billion in transactions. Now, that is a very steep increase, and if you had that type of incremental increase every year for 7 years, then you might get to a 10% level. I can't predict that, but I wanted to throw it out there because it does solve a problem that I didn't think existed. Because when I saw Bitcoin and Litecoin, I said, wait, you're telling me I got to buy this so I can spend it. I have no problem spending things. That's not been an issue. I haven't had a problem where your money's no good. Well, now we're seeing there's places where, for example, and it's not the use case for Bitcoin or Litecoin, is certain content creators will not be allowed to receive money from certain payment processors. They won't process their payment. Certain bank, they can close your bank account down, they can close your PayPal account down, Patreon account, and so on. They can't close down your Bitcoin or Litecoin account. So that's another advantage. And that may be the way that people, I know that's how WikiLeaks funded itself. They got closed down years ago. They funded themselves, and they got Bitcoin at like $20, $50, $100. All right, let's see what you guys think. All right, let's go to our comments. Well, Pablo Pena says he feels like eating popcorn right now. And the reason he feels like eating popcorn, he was looking at this. He was looking at the Netflix wrapper there, the mailer. Remember, in the digital age, they're sending you a digital DVD, And pretty soon, and they still send them out. And that was one that we received the other day. They still send them out, even though most of the video now is done by streaming. MK Harness is here. Scott Wardell is here. Let's see what else we got here. Scott Wardell and Williams, the far and away most dominant Federal Reserve Bank. No, it's not. You're right. Lance Deacon, your voice has an echo. Yeah, Lance, that's because I was playing and I had my own speaker on when I was playing today's earlier live stream. Daniel says you sound like you're in the kill room. Okay. American Supertramp. Back in the day, people could rent a mug. Yep. Now you got to pay. Got to pay to get those Smaulgld mugs. And yes, Pablo, I got to fix that Lucky photo. But he looks kind of cool there. Lucky, the dog, the Doberman Pinscher, Pablo's dog with his Smaulgld mug. And yes, late fees for mugs were hefty. Ann Holloman is saying that Walmart here is promoting shop online. You order your groceries, drive to Walmart, and pick them up already. I used it already. And Amazon is going to start opening up bricks and mortar stores, I understand, as well, if they haven't already. And they have some stores where you can walk in and just walk out without checking out because, I don't know, they tag you or something and they know what you take. So it's interesting. What really harms innovation is not the monopolies. The monopolies themselves can be worked around. What harms competition, again, are not monopolies like Blockbuster. It's when they get governmental protection, like banks, that prevent new entrants and prevent competition. So, for example, and people have predicted this, and it's quite possible, PayPal could still be around 30 years from now because they can lobby and make legislation to make it difficult for people to use Bitcoin and Litecoin, preventing a wider adoption. That's quite possible. That is one of the scenarios. Now, probably without such governmental protection, the technology, in my opinion, would overtake PayPal. It would make no sense to use PayPal when you can use a cryptocurrency that you can buy, convert into fiat, and then use freely as opposed to being stuck on the fees. Now, a lot of people, I can hear them saying, but Bitcoin's worthless because it's imaginary and it's worthless and it's the digital illusion. Yeah, I get all that, but we're not talking about value. We're talking about what people can use to transact. If you're using fiat currencies in any of their forms, digital, credit card, debit card, you're already in that system. So that's not the argument. That argument's lost. Anyone who thinks you're going to use gold and silver as a currency, and this is going to be the debate with David Morgan I'm going to have at the end of the month, I think you're well past. I don't even think he believes that. But once you get into the real world and you realize that we are all transacting in digital illusions and fiat, then why pay a fee on that? And that is exactly what the Bitcoin and Litecoin do, is they allow you to transact without the fee. Now, under ordinary circumstances, that is a superior innovation, just like Netflix was. In fact, Netflix, there was a downside to going feeless. You had to wait a couple of days. With the Bitcoin and Litecoin, you not only go feeless, you don't have to wait. However, maybe you don't have to wait, but if a lot of people started using Bitcoin and Litecoin, the idea is then it couldn't scale. So there's those technological issues to work out. There's Lightning networks, bigger block size, and all that other junk. All right, what else do we got here? Shark Air. The other issue with Blockbuster is when you went to rent the movie, they may not have the movie you wanted to watch in stock. Yes, but that's true also that's a matter of holding inventory, because Netflix would have the same issue. They may not have it available to send to you in 2 days. You may have to wait a few days to get it. What solved the inventory issue was the streaming service. It's just a function of having enough server bandwidth that you can deliver all of the movies. Back in the day, I go in to rent games, says Pablo Pina, for a few days. Big game change now. Games can be downloaded online. Correct. You guys are talking about Greek mythology here, it looks like. Miser. Apply fees above buying mugs outright for the mug life. Also go ahead and put ICO out there for mug coin. Yeah, I should do mug coin. Hi, Miser. Mug coin is the right coin. That is correct. Miser. Absolutely, Pablo. Glad you're here. And Ann. MK Hernest. The dollar is high, so I hope you buy silver, Lewis. Well, see, that's right. That is the time. If you think about it, it makes total sense. A lot of people would go to Europe when the dollar was high. Why? There was this big thing in the 70s and 80s, Europe on $5 a day. Why could you go to Europe on $5 a day? Because the dollar was really strong. Not in the 70s, in the 80s. When the dollar came back, the dollar index was like 130. And people could go and backpack, and the dollar went further. It was the time to buy European goods. Or overseas, we didn't have to pay the tariff. Well, it's the same thing. Any commodity right now, other than palladium, is, in a sense, if the dollar is stronger versus silver and gold, especially versus silver, that means that your dollar goes further and you can buy more silver. I don't know if that means anything. There could be a reason for that, and that could stay in that position, but it is always better to buy your goods and services and your commodities with a strong currency than with a weak currency. Lucky is here too. He's waiting for his walk. Cool dog. Miser's from down south. Ann Holloman. It's about to get cold in the south. 20 degrees on Sunday. Wow. Miser. Living the mug life. Okay. Pablo. Lewis, do you watch everything on Netflix? No, I actually don't watch Netflix at all. My family. I don't even know how to get into the account. I don't use the service. I don't mail. I don't even know how to use it. But I know how it works. And I cancel my Netflix. Yeah, there's other issues about Netflix. But remember, the Netflix innovation has come and gone. Netflix is now dominant because of that innovation of the no fees and return the DVDs. But its business model is past that. Now the business model is promoting content that maybe you don't want to see, raising a lot of money in the capital markets that they don't deserve, that gives them more money to enhance their dominant market position. Totally different. I don't want to focus on Netflix as its original win, which was the no fees. The way it's winning now isn't really winning. It's winning because of this whole myth of the fangs, and they can raise capital, and they can pay the Obamas millions of dollars to watch to make. They have a different agenda now, and this is what happens with companies that are successful. They then find other ways to either remain successful or become more successful, and generally they involve not serving the customer, they involve serving the people who can help them maintain their monopoly position. It's a very important point. Yeah, Miser says, kind of miss rummaging through Blockbuster in a way. Well, I miss rummaging through LP racks, so that's long gone. Even CD racks, they're not around anymore. Anne says she uses her gym. Most people don't. Pablo Pina. Yes, and Netflix is a replacement for cable TV, and so is any other streaming service. In fact, I want to do even more than 4 times a week of gym and less TV or Netflix. Well, that's a smart thing to do. Sonic Scooter just got home from pub. Hello, mate. Oh, you then? Oh, he's here in the UK. Right, closing time. I notice sometimes in the UK they close at 11. The pub down the boozer. They say down the boozer. In the UK, they used to have pubs used to close at 10 o'clock. Then you had to go. Where'd you have to go? You had to go to a nightclub, and sometimes they didn't open for an hour or two, so you had to wait and go have a curry. We'll go for an Indian, yeah. All right, then. Where are we? Great question. Well, I guess they changed it. Closing is 2 a.m. KZGIXXER 1000. Bitcoin's value lies in its mutable, decentralized ledger. That in and of itself doesn't give it value. That is a feature, or that is something that enables it to work. But if people don't use it, just having an immutable ledger in and of itself doesn't mean anything. It has to be an immutable ledger that serves as the basis for the value, such that when you run transactions, you can feel that they're secure. But if you don't run transactions, it doesn't matter. So that's the problem I've always had with Bitcoin. When you say, and then here's how it works, and I think, okay, well, that's a perfect system and it works. But A, there was no value behind receiving the coins, and now I've gotten over that because the markets have ascribed value to the Bitcoins. They're at most current right now. They are at $3,611. That actually consoles me that they're at least worth something today. But then, can I spend them? Yes. And now you get back to your immutable ledger. Then the immutable ledger is valuable because there's a use case to either convert them into fiat as an investment, win, or to use them as a means of medium of exchange. Right, next time ask the bartender to put the live Smaulgld stream on at the pub, right down the boozer, yeah? All right, that'd be funny, yeah? All right, let's see. With his Smaulgld glass as the background. I should send one out to the UK if you could put it there in the pub mugs. Processing fees, the tip of control, prohibition, and directives by law, says Scott Wardell. By the rest of the spear. It's why cryptos will not be allowed to succeed. Well, there's the idea of believing that there is a power that always controls. Certain things they do. Certain things, the, quote, powers that be, have the ability to stop things. In other cases, they don't. So I don't have faith in a omnipotent government crushing everything. I know they have the potential to do that. But if you look over history, it just depends on when you're born and what cycle you're in. Governments don't last. That's why fiat currencies don't last. There were times in the Soviet Union where, yes, anytime you try to do something, they weren't going to let it happen. But they're not around anymore. So it all depends on what government and who's trying to stop you. The most powerful of any foe that wants to stop something is not a company and it's not a government. It's when a company and a government join together and stop something. Yeah, Zimbabwe shut the internet down today. DB Stupid is here. Hello. Scott Wardell, my countrymen got socialist stupid. Must have been the North Sea oil. Went to their frozen brains. Okay. Yeah. Anne's got one of those $1 million bills from Zimbabwe, she's saying. Okay, the dog outside barking. Pablo Pina, Canada used to carry a $1,000 bill, and they got rid of that. I'd never seen a $100 bill. Only until recently did I even have one. Just always thought it was so much money. Okay. David Dalton, what is inherently different about crypto that would necessarily imply lower fees on electronic transactions in dollars? Actually, nothing. The cost of sending the dollar, this was my point. Except that there's a middleman who's a monopoly who's determined to extract a fee. That's my point. If you send me $5, in fact, if you wrote me a check right now, mailed it to what you see on the screen, it's not going to cost any transaction fee, even though so much more energy is going to be involved in that. You're going to have to write the check on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, seal it, put a stamp on it, mail it. The energy is going to take it to get it to me. Then I'm going to have to get it. I'm going to have to then either scan it on my phone, which I would never do, or I'm going to have to go to the bank and stick it in the bank, and I'll get my $5. Now, you would think that would cost more, the total processing, and that's a lot of exchange fees. But when you send $1 to PayPal, it in fact uses less electricity than when you send $1 in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has the mining fees and all the confirmation of the transactions. But yet PayPal is going to snag a bit of it. So that's where it doesn't make sense, because the market value of what they're providing isn't justified. That's a very good question that David's asking, because how do they justify charging that amount of money for something that doesn't cost that much? It's not even, the margin is astronomical on that. It's only because they have a monopoly, and in a sense they're protected with that monopoly through banking laws and so on. So that's why. Big Swear was complaining last week about waiting for his Litecoin. Okay. M, and silver too. MH, EOS can sell. Okay. Sonic Scooter. Anyone buying anything at the moment? I'm in cash, some bonds, and some PMs. Right then. All right. EOS has 50 million transactions per day. Now, I'm going to look that one up. I'm not sure if that's right. You know, you guys, you can look up on BitInfo charts, and you can see the transactions and so on. Now, they don't have EOS on here from some odd reason, but I know that the transactions in a 24-hour period for Litecoin are about 25,000, but for Bitcoin, they're like 310,000 in a 24-hour period. They do about 12,000 an hour, Bitcoin, and about 1,000 an hour for Litecoin. Interesting, Bitcoin Cash only does 500. Now, EOS, I don't see on here. Who even trades that? I think people just hold that, don't they? Anyway, the idea is it doesn't matter the precise numbers. The idea is that thousands of transactions are now happening. 50 million a day. All right. 20,000 transactions. I don't know about that. Pablo Pena. Oh, Ann Holland's mentioning Steam. You know, I'm on Steam or Steam It. Let me give you that if you guys want to check it out there. By the way, you should go over to BitChute as well, because I have a channel there. You never know what happens to this YouTube stuff. If you want to support Smaulgld, you can go and there's the Steam It there. But BitChute too. Let me give you BitChute. BitChute. Okay, what else do we got here? Oops, we're going away there. Gotta get that up there. How many of you ask if you have Netflix? Hi guys, Sam Shepard is here. Happy Friday. ASMR people have been a I've been a Netflix subscriber since 2003, back when they sent the DVDs. Yes, indeed, that was what happened. Oh wow, we got some more here. Hope I can get to all these comments. Oh, it's Friday night. I'll do it. Okay. Sonic Scooter. Pubs haven't closed at 11 in years. No curry. I live very rurally. You know, I haven't been. I used to live there. I haven't been there in years either. Yeah. Okay. Scott Wardell. If you were going to argue that legal tender laws will not continue tightly necessary, then beautiful dreamer, come unto me. Well, if someone told you in 1880 that people would accept something other than gold or silver or money, you would think they were nuts. If you told them in 1950, they wouldn't believe you. And yet, look how quickly it happened. I'll give you another one. Would you think there would have been gay marriage in the 60s? They told you. A lot of things, the pace of change. What about Uber? I mean, there's so many things that have changed so quickly in the last 10, 15 years. There was a book out in the 60s. It was called Future Shock. This is in the 60s. They were talking about the pace of change, how it just exponentially increases, and what impact that has on how people actually think or interact. So I don't know. I don't like to say gold is money, period, or we will always use Bitcoin, or horses of transportation, period, or we'll always have legal tender laws. The reason you have certain things are because they're needed or because they're enforced. But generally, if they're enforced and not needed, they do go away. That's the arc of history, as the progressives like to say. If it's not needed and it's forced upon you, it doesn't. The forces are working against you when you force people to do stuff or use stuff that doesn't have a real use. But you could be right, Scott. We could be having legal you could still have legal tender laws. Remember, a legal tender law doesn't outlaw other currencies. It just means you must accept for payment the currency of the issuer. Now, you already have, Scott, Ohio and a few other states. Ohio actually accepts Bitcoin as payment. Now, remember, they don't accept Bitcoin, but they allow you to pay Bitcoin through BitPay, the service. So you can have them competing currencies or alternative currencies, even with legal tender laws. Well, the government is getting increasing authoritarian, planning on buying Bitcoin when it gets in the 2K range. Okay, that's Tossing Molotov says. I want some bolivars. You give me the bolivars. Someone wants bolivars. Seth Shepard, do you think crypto will rebound all this year? I bought a lot of Litecoin around $100. Yeah, who knows what these things are going to do? It's very hard to predict. Lewis, any thoughts on RMC's bankruptcy and Valcami's bid to buy those assets? Well, I saw that Salivate Metal was doing a show on it. I didn't watch it yet because I was doing this. But, no, I mean, the problem when you buy bankrupt assets is you really have to do your due diligence. You want to make sure you're not buying any outstanding liabilities. So, haven't really thought that one through. Thanks to Jason. All right, Seth Shepard. Yeah, I don't tell you to buy. You know that. I don't tell you to buy anything. I admit up front, I don't know anything really. I analyze. But, and even this thing with the prediction, I'm making a market analysis prediction, not a Bitcoin prediction, that there is an issue. When the market sees an issue, it solves it unless, as you guys have all pointed out, some government tries to stop it. But otherwise, the markets will figure it out. Just because a company has a monopoly doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong. In fact, there's a theory on predatory pricing, why that is not a bad thing and why it shouldn't be outlawed by anyone's interested. I wrote a law review article on this, but I'll give you the 1-minute synopsis. If a company comes around and charges less than everybody else, and by doing so, they obtain a monopoly, who's been harmed? All the companies that were charging more. Have you been harmed? No. You pay less, if you're just looking purely on an economic perspective. And the problem with charging less is you're going to lose money. And unless you've got unlimited money, you're always going to lose money. It's kind of like Amazon. Amazon keeps the prices down. They're willing to lose money. I'm willing to buy from them if they don't want to mark up their price as much. So the idea that a monopoly is a bad thing just because they're monopoly is not true. Generally, monopoly gets to be a monopoly by providing a quality good or service at the lowest possible price. That in and of itself isn't a problem. What the problem in antitrust law is what's called monopolizing. But charging lower prices itself isn't monopolizing. Monopolizing, to me, is when you shut out competitors, you use the government to create laws and regulations that makes it hard for people to compete against you. But I have no trouble. It's the same with rich people. I have no trouble with somebody being richer than everybody else. I don't worry about wealth inequality. If that person created a good or service and everyone bought it and he didn't force anyone to buy it and they wanted to buy his or her good or service and he became or she became rich as a result, then they deserve the money. Same with a company. If they continue to provide a great service and it's the lowest price, and if there wasn't, I'd go somewhere else. The problem I have is with people and organizations that make money, but it's unjustly made. You have to make a big distinction between people who work and have all types of protections. Like Warren Buffett used to be, in my mind, a great investor. He actually went in the market, did the research, figured out the Graham's theories on value. But when he bought the Goldman Sachs and he knew that the government was going to backstop it, he's not an investor, he's a crony capitalist. So there's a big difference between people who get rich on the merits and then people who don't get rich on the merits. They use favors or they stay rich not on the merits. No leveraged platinums ETFs. No, I was looking at that today on the before I got on with Silver Doctors. There is a platinum ETF. I don't know if there's any. I don't think there's a palladium. There's not that much palladium to put into an ETF. I think they only mine about 5 million ounces a year. We were talking about how much palladium are in the COMEX vaults. It's like 17,000 ounces, and yet they trade millions around it. So Seth Shepard says, I do believe in a decentralized crypto, still really worried. Well, that's the thing. I mean, when these guys tell you something's definitely going to go up, not necessarily. I would tell you that in my faith that things will change on the fee structure, that PayPal will not be allowed by the markets to continue to charge what they charge. Why? There's other solutions. Now, whether it's Bitcoin or Litecoin, it may not be. But I do believe that something will dethrone something that, as I think it was, I don't want to screw up, I'll lose my place, but a new person on here said, why does it cost so much to send a digital dollar? Well, it shouldn't. And so like Seth is saying, I do believe in decentralized crypto. Yes, it makes sense, but it can, as Scott points out, it could be thwarted. I mean, there's nothing goes in a straight line. DB stupid. People are talking $6 Litecoin again. All right, that's possible. Could go to $600. Who knows? But tune in to your local pumper channels, and they'll tell you where silver and Bitcoin and Litecoin are going for sure. All right. Nicholas Schulten is new here. Litecoin is going to $1, he says. I have a stock dedicated to mining palladium, says Pablo Pina. All right. Everything could tank. EOS is not used as a currency. That's right, John. I didn't want to go into all that. John, you'd appreciate if you go back. I don't know if you've been here the whole time, but I went through the concepts of why people and merchants might want to use cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Litecoin as opposed to using a payment system like PayPal. I know that's your business. Litecoin is great for payments and compatible with Lightning Network, which makes it really important for the future. Now, what Lightning Networks does, it solves that speed issue, but it's not ready for prime time right now. And and the speed issue is part and parcel of the overloading of the network, which isn't an issue yet, but would be if you had more widespread adoption. So it's almost like Lightning Networks is preparing for more transactions, and then that would allow the transactions to happen and be recorded onto that immutable ledger afterwards, and then also that would give the merchants the incentive, just they don't even have to know about this, is that they still have the low fees, and they don't have to worry about transaction volumes getting so high that it'll slow down and clog up the system. Litecoin is decentralized money. Anyone could mine it. Has a limit, says Seth Shepard. All right. See, if you notice, talking about the price, it doesn't really give you anything, especially with Bitcoin and Litecoin, because they don't have any fundamentals. They don't have earnings. It's very hard to discuss price. It's mostly sentiment. Nicholas Schulten, until the altcoin crash, the bear market will not be over. Too many people are ignorant of what Bitcoin is. Well, that's definitely true. Plus, Litecoin has liquidity, says John Moore, easy to get in and out with fiat currencies. That's extremely important for adoption. Yes, Seth says, and Noble on some of these alts. Seth Shepard, I made my first Litecoin purchase, I think, when it was 30. All right, let's get away from this pricing discussion here. Scott Verdell. There you go. Alvin Toffler wrote Future Shock. I read it. I suspect Deep Slate shill him, not me. Yeah, I mean, that was a book they thrust upon you when you were in school. DB stupid. Legal tender law doesn't require acceptance unless there was already agreement to do the service. Right. Which means that you could use other currencies. And I beg to differ with the Bitcoin standard and all the maximalists. I think she meant maximalists. Yes. Okay. Yeah, people get, once they become enamored with an asset, they get very dug in. Gold is money, period. Bitcoin, maximalist. Everything else is an S coin. Silver is set to skyrocket. People are nuts if they don't understand it. Yeah, if you don't see your point of view, and then what they do is, there's always a guru. There's always a document they can point to, like the Bitcoin standard. That'll show you. And of course, if you want to believe that, and you don't read it critically, and you don't think why it may be wrong, anyone who makes a valid argument, a cogent argument, and you just listen to it, you're like, yep, sign me up. That makes sense. And you just repeat it. And you read it over and over again. And you tell everyone else to read it. And then you scoff at anyone who says, how can you not believe the Bitcoin standard? And then they read from it. What I like to do, as you know, I like to look through everything and purposely try to figure out why what they're saying is wrong. And if it's not wrong, why it's not necessarily dispositive, meaning, yeah, okay, well, that's true. So what? I'll just go around that. I'll do something else, or there's something. Very few people actually do that. Most people are looking for answers. That's why they go online and listen to these morons telling you something's going to go up, and then they buy it. And it makes sense when they tell you to buy it because they told you 3 things, and they could be 3 true things, but they could be 3 true things that are irrelevant or don't take into account something else. All right. Even Andreas Andronopoulos recognizes that alts are here. So I don't care who recognizes anything. All right, John Moore. Super easy to donate to Smaulgld. By the way, John's going to get a piece, a commission. Anything over $50, I'm going to send him 10%. John has actually donated to me live on screen here. Also, John sells... if you put the link up, I'll give you a free link there, John. The how to get your Litecoin HODL hoodies, I think he sells. Very nice. All right, let's see. You guys are talking. DB stupid. Smaulgld was horrible. Well, there you go. And why did Smaulgld allow it to exist? The government granted it the monopoly. Got broken up and came back. Scott Wardell. If digital currencies come out, it will be the way the deep state economist Ken Rogoff called it. By the government. On you in total control as academic expert recommendation. That's one view. I mean, one view is they're trying to say one argument against Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies is the government will issue their own. Well, it's not the same thing. You can put anything on the blockchain, but if it's not decentralized and it's subject to hacking, and in fact, even just going digital and not having physical specie cash is something that Sweden has recognized, who's the king of cashless society, that if they were ever overtaken by the Russians and they came to their place and they took over the Riksbank, then they would not have the ability. They would lose the ability to fight the Russians with any monetary wealth, because it would all have been co-opted and captured by the Russians, who would own the entire digital network, and that's where all their money is. Now, if there was a bunch of Swedish cash, they may be able to pay people and gather a resistance. So the danger and a lot of the central banks are balking now at issuing a cryptocurrency. Look who's doing one. Venezuela. No, they're not too bright. I mean, they'll do anything. But I don't mean Venezuelans. I mean the government. So it's not necessarily what's going to happen. It may not be in government's best interest to issue a mandatory digital currency. In fact, if you read the Fed's faster payments documents, about 7-8 years ago, they came up with a thing. They thought that the only reason anyone would even want to use a cryptocurrency is because we need faster payments. That was their view. But they go through the pros and cons. One of them is Fedcoin. But there's about 8 or 9 other proposals they're looking at, and they're not too keen on it. They think they would lose monetary policy. They think that's what's important, that they're really trying to keep their jobs. But having one government currency on their own centralized blockchain is probably not a good idea. All right. Okay. Nicholas Schulten, you're all buying a coin or project simply on the hope that it'll rise faster than Bitcoin, period. Well, that's true. I don't know about the period. And that's the same thing with Bitcoin as well, though. People do buy into coins, projects, ICOs, IPOs, stocks, gold, silver, and yes, Bitcoin on hope that it will rise faster than something else. And it is possible that, look at this, who thought that palladium would rise faster than gold, silver, or platinum? It's obvious to say now, well, it's such a small float and that's why it rose, but who could have known that? No one knows. All right. And I think we're almost gone here. John, I read the Bitcoin Standard and enjoyed it, but don't get the whole Bitcoin extremist thing. Yeah, it's just what happens when you fall in love with an asset. You only see its positives. You refuse to see anything that could be different, and you scoff at everything, and you don't give its weaknesses enough credibility. Miser, all of it's hackable. We got to get going here, but I'm glad it's a good group here on a Friday night. Nicholas, I am a payments processor, says John Moore. Litecoin and Bitcoin are both good coins. They're really the only two we offer for payment processing. KZ, Trump will talk about the wall. Okay, Nicholas Shogun. That's in it. We should have that discussion one other day. Lee sold all his Litecoin. That doesn't mean anything to me. It means something to a lot of people, but that doesn't change the fundamental nature of the coin. It means he's either a good market timer or because Litecoin isn't a project. It's not like an ICO. Now, if a guy who's in an ICO who you're counting on to build the DAO and to make it into something that's profitable, like Mugcoin. Let's say I issue Mugcoin, and I have this grand plan for, you know, everyone's going to get a mug, and you can loan your mugs and buy your mugs, and it's going to be great. And then Mugcoin, I issue it pre-mined in the ICO, and it's like $3. It goes to $200, and then I sell it. Well, good luck with Mugcoin doing anything, because now I'm rich and I could care less. But Litecoin is different. It's not really, you don't need Charlie Lee to do anything. It's just like you don't need whoever created Bitcoin to do anything. Different type. Litecoin is hardly decentralized. Well, that's true. Actually, people don't realize that 25% of the coins are in Coinbase and 40% of the coins are in the top 10 wallets, which is even higher concentration. They always complain about Bitcoin being highly concentrated, but Litecoin's even more so. Litecoin is a testnet for Bitcoin. That is correct. Charlie Lee sold his Litecoin, but that's got nothing to do with anything. He made a lot of money. Okay. That doesn't deflect from whatever inherent qualities that Litecoin would have. He's not, no one depends on Charlie Lee or anyone at Bitcoin to make it work. And in fact, since he sold it, that Litecoin Foundation, which he partially funded, which I don't know how much he put in, but they did get some of that publicity from the UFC. So that's a positive thing, whether he sold or not. I don't think that has anything to do with what the coin is. With Charlie Lee sold his Litecoin. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. I enjoyed the exchange, and let me know what you think about the Blockbuster, Netflix, PayPal, Bitcoin analogy in the comments below. If you haven't watched the whole thing, it's basically the first half hour, 40 minutes, where we discussed that, and then we took a lot of questions. So thank you very much for joining me, and we will see you tomorrow. Yes, Pablo is noting this is the first time we never, ever, ever got cut off. We always get cut off with the streaming. I guess the censors are not, they're not paying attention tonight. Foundation is centralized, but a foundation doesn't run the coin, Nicholas. But point taken. All right, Nicholas, we'll see you hopefully more often here. I said goodnight already, didn't I? Yes. All right. I gotta get off then.